Hello and welcome to Roundtable, where we talk about the issues that matter to you and get the answers from the experts. I'm Matt Deal. On today's program, we'll talk about Anne Arundel County's efforts to improve the overall health of our local waterways and meet the state and federal government requirements for a swimmable and fishable Chesapeake Bay by the year 2025. On today's program, our guests will include DPW Director Chris Phipps, the county's Administrator of the Watershed Protection and Restoration Program, Erik Michelson, and Councilman Chris Trumbauer, representing the Annapolis area on the County Council and a staunch supporter of waterway improvement. Chris Phipps, as Director of the Department of Public Works, you oversee all things DPW. Can you provide us some insight into the sources of pollution that we deal with in our local waterways?
Sure. Well, the pollutant sources that we deal with are basically from two main categories, what we call point source pollution and non-point source pollution. Point source pollution is that which is measurable, concentrated, and is typical of discharge from a wastewater treatment plant. Non-point source pollution is diffuse, difficult to measure, comes from various sources, and that's typically characterized by stormwater runoff from urban areas, septic system discharges, as well as agricultural runoff. Anne Arundel County is mainly focused on, from an obligatory standpoint, regulatory standpoint, the wastewater treatment plant discharges from point source and the urban stormwater runoff, as well as septic conversions or septic system discharges.
That's a lot to deal with. What's the current strategy the county's employing to improve the overall health, given all those sources of pollution?
Our strategies are very detailed, spelled out in what we call a watershed implementation plan, and that is really a byproduct of the EPA having imposed a bay pollution diet. What we call technically is a bay total maximum daily load. It's that amount of pollution that the bay can assimilate and still maintain a healthy condition. We've exceeded that amount, so it has to be reduced. So what we're doing is we're making significant upgrades at our wastewater treatment plants, what we call enhanced nutrient removal technology. We have, through the Watershed Protection and Restoration Fund, we have a very detailed, comprehensive strategy for upgrading stream restorations, best management practices, and stormwater retrofit projects, and that's all defined in our Watershed Protection and Restoration Fund. We also have the third component is the septic to public sewer conversion or nitrogen removal unit installation on septic systems to reduce nitrogen loads. That's it's pretty much in a developmental stage. We're looking at developing plans for how we would undergo such a conversion of the septic system discharges.
All right, well, we'll get more on that in a couple minutes, but I want to turn to Councilman Trumbauer. What is the current overall health of our local waterways, and what can the council do about it?
Sure, thanks. And unfortunately right now, the condition of many of our waterways is not completely clean, and it's one of the reasons that our Department of Health in the county has actually issued a 48-hour preemptive advisory against water contact after any significant rainfall. And what that means is they're making a broad statement that if it rains in the county, enough pollution is going to make its way into our rivers, creeks, and streams that they don't want people going in the water. It's just not worth the risk. And so, Chris detailed all of the technical reasons and the plan that the county is going to reduce pollution. But I want to try and boil it down to why it matters to our residents, right? So, why do we care if our creeks are clean, if the Chesapeake Bay is clean? And to me, it's really two different reasons. Number one, Anne Arundel County is a great place to live. A lot of us live here because we're close to water. We want access to water, whether we swim in it, our kids swim in it, whether we want to go kayaking in it, or whether we actually want to eat seafood out of it, right? I mean, I went crabbing the other day, got some crabs, and I want to feel, hey, if I can catch crabs in my local waterway, I want to be able to eat them. In fact, just walking to work this morning on the sidewalks of the city of Annapolis, I saw a young, teenager walking the other way, just carrying a crab net, walking down towards the city dock area, right? So it's kind of part of Anne Arundel County. The other thing is, I think our local waterways are really attached to our whole economy. I mean, people locate their businesses here, people move here because really, I mean, you think about two things. One, they want a good school system, and two, they want the access to this quality of life. So, you know, we have to make sure, I think, as stewards of our county government, that we are assuring that the waterways are safe and that they're actually an attractive amenity and resource for our citizens that live here.
It's a quality of life issue that I'm sure you agree that it boils down to what you just said, public safety, the economy,
sure,
as well as the recreation aspect.
Yeah, and the second part of your question, you know, what can we do about it? That's where, you know, the council, I think, has to oversee policies and legislative initiatives that are going to be common sense approach, effective approaches to reducing pollution and you know, protecting the quality of life, and also, you know, Chris mentioned wastewater treatment plants and septic systems and sewer infrastructure and all of that. We got to take good care of that. We got to make sure that that's doing its job and also protecting our citizens. So,
well, Chris will talk in after I talk to Mr. Michelson about some of his program's aspects and efforts about the wastewater treatment process and some of the advances we've made there. But first, let's talk about your program, Erik. What exactly is the Watershed Protection and Restoration Program, and what role does it play in improving the overall health of our waterways?
So when the council created the Watershed Protection and Restoration Program through the creation of the stormwater fee, it basically allowed the county to consolidate all of its stormwater operations under the single umbrella of this program. And so, as Chris had mentioned, in terms of the county's global strategy involving wastewater treatment plant upgrades, septic upgrades, and stormwater, we're really charged with tackling that stormwater component, which in Anne Arundel County is very significant. Much of the county was developed in an era before modern stormwater controls. To the extent that there was any stormwater practices in place, they were generally aimed at flood control, which sometimes actually was intended to vent that water more quickly from our urban areas down to our creeks and rivers, which can create all sorts of problems. So what we've got is a program in place where we're really focused on restoration through three primary strategies, which are looking at existing stormwater practices and trying to bring those up to contemporary standards so we can get water quality treatment, looking at areas where basically stormwater has been discharged onto erosive or unstable slopes and created erosional issues, outfalls that we're repairing, and then, as Chris had mentioned, stream and wetland restoration. So trying to really put back the kidneys of the system, our non-tidal wetlands and those stream systems, to improve water quality before that water gets down to our tidal creeks.
So there's some mandates that you have to follow, and goals that you are charged with achieving to, I guess, have a swimmable and fishable Chesapeake Bay by the year 2025. I guess tell everybody, you know, how well are we on our way?
So as Chris mentioned, we've got the Bay pollution diet, the total maximum daily load, which is the 2025 deadline you stated. We've also got a near-term deadline of 2019 in terms of our state-issued stormwater permit. It's called an MS4 permit. It stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, issued by MDE. And as a condition of that, we have to retrofit about 5,800 acres of impervious surface, so hard surfaces, roadways, rooftops, parking lots that cause stormwater to run off and collect pollutants and convey those down to our waterways. We've got to provide treatment for those acres, and at this point we're at about 1,400 to 1,500 acres. So we're making progress. We've got a lot of partners. We're working closely with the nonprofit community to try to do some of that work in parallel with us, and we're also, like I say, working to bring many of the practices in the county that exist up to contemporary standards so that we can get better treatment from those facilities.
Yeah, and I might add, because Erik will never toot his own horn, but you know, all of the major counties are dealing with similar mandate and requirements, and our program at Anne Arundel is really viewed as a leader, as a model program, and it's because of, you know, the willingness to work with the nonprofit sector, the innovative technologies, the types of projects that we're doing and implementing, that all around the state, you know, people are looking at Anne Arundel's program and saying, hey, look, there's something that's working, there's something that we should try and emulate, you know, in our county. So I just want to make sure the viewers realize that their county government is doing a good job on this one.
I think that's a great point, Chris. I know you can talk to this as well. Chris Phipps can talk to this as well. Before there was a funding mechanism in place, Anne Arundel County had these projects in place, but just did not have the funding to do as much as you can now with this revenue stream in place. And to that point, I believe Anne Arundel County actually did the pilot for the first plan in place. One of the, was part of the planning pilot for the state.
We were one of two jurisdictions that was selected to do a pilot study for the necessary upgrades to the stormwater infrastructure to meet the TMDL as well as the MS4 permit obligations. We were considered an urban county, and then I think it was Caroline County was considered a rural county. So between the two of us, we were used as a pilot, and it was really as part of the framework of developing our watershed implementation plan, the three-legged stool approach to solving our pollutant issue: septic, stormwater, and wastewater treatment. So that's where we were selected as one of two counties as a pilot.
Using your, or reflecting back on your experience with Anne Arundel County and how maybe the strategies or philosophies have changed regarding addressing stormwater pollution, how have things evolved over the years?
Well, definitely through the techniques that we're using. As Councilman referred to, we are using very advanced techniques for especially stream restoration. And we are in fact cutting edge, leading edge. People come from all over the world, believe it or not, to visit some of our projects, the effectiveness of some of these projects that we've completed over the last, it's been ongoing a decade. What we weren't able to do though is enhance our program to sufficiently to address all of the pressing needs to meet our pollutant load reduction goals. Most of our resources were put towards operation and maintenance, keeping the storm drain pipes operational, safety concerns with culverts collapsing and things like that. Most of our investments were put into things to maintain the system, not necessarily enhance the system to meet the pollutant reduction goals. Now with the watershed protection revenues that are dedicated revenues that are coming in, we're able to expand that program to pick up the water quality improvements above and beyond just simple maintenance.
Well, now we're in the third year of the program. Just started that, I guess, at the beginning of July. Talk about the momentum and the plan moving forward as a program and as a county. We started with a 6-year capital improvement program. Talk about the next 3 years and beyond.
So we've got about 200 projects currently in the pipeline, and most of those are in design. Some of them are in construction or approximating construction. A lot of the work that had been underway for the several years before the lead up to the program is basically coming to a conclusion. So we're able to close those out because we've got dollars for construction and that sort of thing now. But I think over the next several years, it's going to be a very exciting time. The simpler projects, many of the retrofit projects are moving from design to construction in probably 2 years or so. Some of the stream work is probably on a longer time horizon in terms of 4 to 5 years to construction. But as Chris had alluded to, we're moving from a situation where the county was able to do maybe 1 or 2 of these water quality projects on an annual basis to where we're looking at, building 30 or 40 a year plus. So it really, I think the scale of implementation is, taking off, and I think there's going to be a lot of very interesting and effective work going in the ground over the next several years.
Erik and Councilman Trumbauer, feel free to jump in on this because I'm sure you deal with this as well. Talk about the challenges of discussing the improvement of waterways and the investment that goes with it when it's not necessarily tangible. So when you're talking to constituents and you're saying, well, this will, this is what's going to happen, and they might see the construction, but I guess they just have to wait for a report or something along those lines to say, hey, our water's better?
I think in the public eye, a lot, the notion of water pollution in the Chesapeake or local rivers, like Chris had said before, if you've got a point source where you've got a pipe that's discharging into the waterway, that's something that resonates with folks. Or if you've got a chicken coop that's discharging pollution, that's again something people can seize upon. But the notion of these thousands of little insults, the fact that somebody's using fertilizer on their lawn, or that pet waste hasn't been picked up, or that there's little bits of pollution all across the landscape that in the aggregate are having impacts on our waterways, is something that I think a lot of folks aren't necessarily familiar with, or they think that the practices that they're doing, they don't have runoff from their property. And so there's a fair amount of education that goes into it. But really in Anne Arundel County, like Chris said, we don't have a lot of agriculture, certainly north of the South River, but we do have a lot of septic systems, over 40,000. We've got wastewater treatment plants, all of which will basically be upgraded to the limits of technology by the end of 2017. And we have a lot of stormwater runoff. Much of the county, particularly in North County, again, has no stormwater controls in terms of polluted runoff. And so it's really about explaining to people how the things that we're doing are by basically holding water on the landscape, by infiltrating it into the ground, by allowing it to be processed through wetland vegetation and that sort of thing, how we're improving water quality. And there's a learning curve there. And I think, again, a lot of folks in their mind's eye think of stormwater management as flood control. So if the water's gone within minutes after the storm event, that's working properly. And so it's trying to get the buy-in to say, well, look, the fact that you've got this area that's wet most of the time is actually a benefit to the local waterway. And if there's ways that we can incorporate that, make it sort of a park-like setting for residents, or an opportunity for school kids to use it as a living laboratory, those are the kinds of co-benefits we see. But like I say, there's some education there.
And I think the key is really keeping it local. I mean, it's hard sometimes for people to get their head around the larger Chesapeake Bay cleanup effort, right? It's a big watershed, there's lots of problems, and it's abstract, and people they tune out. And it's a mistake to think that we're going to clean up the bay and then we're going to see all the creeks and the streams be clean. It's the exact opposite. We're going to clean up our local waterways, and that, in turn, all across the watershed is what's going to make the Chesapeake Bay healthy. And so it's really important to think about this on a community level. There's a particular project that I was involved in with the department, where years ago, right after I was first sworn into office, a neighborhood called me up and they're like, look, we got this problem. This old earthen dam stormwater thing is a mess, and it's flooding our basements, and it's creating this public safety problem. And first thing I did was I called up DPW and I said, "Are you guys know about this?" Like, "Yeah, we know about it. It's on our list. We won't get to it for many years." And then with the creation of the new stormwater program, the additional resources we devoted to that, the department completed construction on that earlier this year. We had, I guess you'd call it a ribbon cutting, although we didn't cut a ribbon, we planted a tree. And the neighborhood showed up and they're like, look, not only did you guys alleviate the actual problem, which was they were worried that this earthen dam was going to fail, it was backing up, flooding their private property, and also risking the downstream habitat. But they said, we've now got this nice community amenity. They've put a little bench there. People come and watch birds, and it's doing a functional job, but it also enhanced the community. And so that's an example of a project that really helps on multiple benefits. And I think when people start seeing that, whether it's a little micro solution, you're replacing storm drains here, or making a grass swale where it used to flood, or it's one of these larger projects, that's when people make the connection to, okay, now I understand what this program is about, I see what's happening, how it's helping. And they've got projects now going on all across the county, dozens of projects underway. And it's also, it's putting people to work, it's enhancing the local economy, because in Anne Arundel, we've actually got a lot of planning and design and construction firms that are located here, that are doing this work, and that are supporting jobs. So you can't outsource, construction jobs to China. I mean, these are local folks that are getting this work and enhancing the communities.
All right, Chris, tell us about the county's major investment in enhanced nutrient removal as it relates to the wastewater treatment process and how this will also, and not also will, is already improving the health of our local waterways.
Sure. This is one of the, without a doubt, this is the biggest contribution the county has made towards water quality in the Bay cleanup. Yet it's been something very unheralded because it's behind the fence, if you will. People don't see it like they see a stream restoration. So we're upgrading all of our wastewater treatment plants to what we call limit of technology, enhanced nutrient removal. It'll take nitrogen discharges, it'll increase the removal efficiency rate about 300%. So it's a significant reduction in our nitrogen pollution as well as our phosphorus pollution, which are the two main parameters along with sediment that pollute the bay. We're investing, we will have invested upwards of $250 million. And it's been ongoing for the last 5 years or so. It's happening at 6 of our wastewater plants. 4 of them are completed, or have at least substantial completion, and they're showing significant results towards, in fact, far exceeding what we had designed them for in terms of performance efficiency removal. And the last plant, Cox Creek, is the largest capital investment the county has ever undertaken. It's a project that is scheduled to be complete in January of 2017. And collectively, $250 million worth of improvements. These are all driven by, essentially what we're doing is we're increasing the metabolic rate of a wastewater treatment plant to remove pollutants. And that's through biological processes. We add oxygen, the wastewater stream goes through an anaerobic and aerobic cycling process, which stimulates the metabolic process for reducing nitrogen in the waste stream. And some of the performance we're already seeing is we designed them for what we call, we're taking the nitrogen concentrations from 8 milligrams per liter or parts per million down to 3 parts per million. That's the design. We're actually seeing results of 1 part per million. So in actual effective performance, we're seeing almost 1,000% or 800% improvement in nitrogen removal. So we're really encouraged with the results we're seeing. The investments have been significant, but they've been, as I said before, the biggest contribution that the county has made towards pollutant reduction as part of the Bay cleanup.
All right. And I know there's some challenges that go along with the major capital projects, at the same time keeping those facilities online.
Every one of these plants that's undergoing these upgrades, we have to maintain permit. So I relate it to, it's not unlike open heart surgery. We've got to keep the patient alive while we're making these upgrades. So there's a series of bypasses that have to be installed, sequentially taking different unit processes out of service while we upgrade them, put them back into service, take another one off. So it's a lengthy process as well, given that. That's why it's taken us 5-6 years to get through it. But it is complicated, it's challenging, it takes a choreographed and coordinated effort to do so. But so far, the results have been extremely impressive.
Well, in tandem with some of the stream restorations that are going on, as well as other activities and outreach, it certainly bodes well for the overall health of our local waterways. Erik, take us through a stream restoration project and how you start it, plan it, design it, and complete it.
Sure. So the county has a number of projects on public property that we've undertaken, but the reality is that most of the property in the county is privately owned. And so for any project, whether it be stream restoration or other projects, what we work to do on the early stages is to get the surrounding public involved, so either landowners or people who would be affected, to get them conceptually bought into what we're looking to move forward with. And so we have a series of public meetings and outreach. Once we've gotten that concurrence, then we end up bringing a design consultant on board to do survey, to do assessments of the existing conditions. But for many of these systems, over the course of the past decade, really, the county has been doing watershed assessments to find out where the high pollution areas are throughout the county, figure out where the county can best spend its dollars to get a good return on its investment, and to address these spots. But once we've got those designs in place, place again to work iteratively with the community to get their continued buy-in, and then eventually go through the permitting process and construction process to develop these projects. And it's interesting because the county has done a number of these over the course of the past decade, and oftentimes, if you're out there wandering around looking at the condition of the project, neighbors will come out and talk to you about what they think about it, and sometimes opinions are all over the place. But I mean, I've been in instances where people have said that they particularly bought a house because it backed up to one of the projects that had been completed, or that they enjoy sitting out on their porch, sipping a cup of coffee, watching the herons, in a system like this. And so it gets back to the points that Chris Trumbauer had made in terms of, these facilities, if you want to call them that, but can be not only water quality benefits, but also provide enhanced quality of life. And really, for us to be making an investment of this scale, we feel that it's important to be trying to maximize or optimize the benefits to the surrounding communities, and not just look at it from a water quality perspective, but figure out, can we incorporate trails, can we incorporate signage into these projects that make the community feel a stewardship connection to these projects to keep them going.
All right. All this is extremely exciting. Councilman, when can your constituents maybe look at the water and say, hey, I see a difference?
Well, that's a great question, and a lot of these efforts are really for the long term. I mean, we're not going to put in one project and the bay is going to be clean tomorrow. But I think on the local side, you are going to start to see changes, positive changes, when we're actually doing the stormwater management projects and in the areas where the wastewater treatment plants discharge. And you can see, anecdotally, you're already starting to get some good news, right? I mean, we got through this summer without any major fish kills that I was aware of. The water clarity, the water looks clear this summer. I mean, people are talking about that. Under the scientific data is saying that the underwater grasses are starting to respond and come back a little bit. So you're starting to see finally some good news instead of the constant drumbeat of bad news. And so I think bit by bit, project by project, in our county, we are making a difference, and it won't be too long before collectively we'll be able to see that sort of change, I think, bear out in terms of maybe one day we can lift the water advisory, or maybe one day we'll have underwater grasses back in all of our river, and the oysters will be there, and fish will be abundant, and you can swim off your dock or whatever you want to do. And like I said, it won't be tomorrow, but bit by bit we're making progress, and I think it's a hopeful future.
Erik, how can people find out more about your program and ways to improve the health of our local waterways?
Sure. There's a whole bunch of information on our website, which is aarivers.org, pretty easy to remember. We've got information about restoration projects that we've got underway, information about the stormwater fee. We've also got our most recent fiscal 15 stormwater report, which gives details on the work that's been underway to date, as well as some of our partnerships. So I would encourage folks to visit, and if they've got any questions, there's ways to contact us through the website as well.
All right, great. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, that's all the time we have on today's edition of Roundtable. I want to thank our panel guests today, Councilman Chris Trumbauer, Chris Phipps, the Director of the Department of Public Works, and Erik Michelson, the Program Administrator for the Watershed Protection and Restoration Program. If you would like to learn more about the county's efforts to improve the overall health of our local waterways, please visit www.aarivers.org. See you next time.